Hello everyone. This is weird. I've not done one of these in a while. It's a pre-record because I'm at Rail Live. It's Wednesday, so it means because today isn't a strike day, I will have been doing all of my filming, and so I'm probably very exhausted at this very moment. I will be possibly at a dinner table prodding other railway industry people and getting the lowdown on things. That's probably what I'm doing right now. I might have just gone to the hotel room and fallen asleep, though. I may have had heat stroke. Variety of things depending on the weather. Anyway, tonight. Well, actually, it's Monday night because I realised I needed to do a pre-record and did that in a massive panic. Tonight, though, we are going to very quickly cover. It's a very quick history of UK rail strike action, along with much news. So yeah, it'll be a bit of a quick whiz through. It's not an instructive history. Go and speak to Dr. David Turner or other railway historians for that. But it's just a bit of a quick whiz through because actually, if you're like me and actually not that up to date with exactly what strike action has happened when, hopefully this will provide a little bit of a guide. It was a learning exercise for me as much as anything to kind of remind myself of what was happening when. We'll look at successes, we'll look at failures, we'll think about some context. We'll maybe refer to the big 1955 strike because everyone seems to be referring to that in the context of this one. And that's not a good idea, as David said in his thread. Anyway, we'll get to that. Right, first, the news. Oh my goodness. So, I tell you what. Let me click the right button. Here we are. So yeah, probably. I don't know because it's Monday and tomorrow is strike day. From my perspective, you're seeing this in the future. The strike is probably happening. I highly doubt government will have actually succeeded in negotiating anything because the government doesn't want to do anything. They are fundamentally opposed to doing anything. So, solidarity to everyone in the RMT. There are a lot of people currently foregoing quite a lot of money in order to stand up for their and their less fortunate colleagues' rights. So, absolute solidarity to the RMT. Here's this man. Lying nasty piece of work. Our current transport minister. Says lots of things, does nothing. He's just, I think he's mostly obsessed with his private plane that he likes to fly in. I think that's pretty much it. Anyway, the strike is probably happening. What was this man Chaps saying? Grant Chaps was saying that he was saying this is news from two weeks ago now. Since 2 weeks ago is RailNatter because the last one with Alexandra I didn't have any news because I was under the cosh again for reasons which I'll tell you at the end of the news. Anyway, he was saying that, bearing in mind that he said it was bad that agency staff are being used by P&O, now he's saying that agency staff might be used, which is funny because you can't train agency staff to become signallers or indeed maintenance, track workers and things. So this is just a gimmick to try and get people away from the strike. I don't know what the general public's feeling is against the strike. It feels quite positive on Twitter, but that's a bubble. So I don't know what the reality is on the ground. But I hope that all of the right wing frothing about the strike being all bad and blah blah blah, all this nonsense hasn't cut through. We'll have to see. But yeah, so there's this sort of nonsense. The TSSA, this is potentially in a balloon. The TSSA, it's my union, are currently balloting Network Rail staff and train operating company staff, whether they also need to strike based on a similar premise. So that might happen. So vote yes in your ballot if you believe so. I certainly would support those strikes if I could. Sadly, I don't get balloted for this because I'm outside of Network Rail, so I don't get this ballot. But absolutely sorry. Sadly, you can't do flying picketing either, so I can't just take the day off and come and join the picket line. That would be sackable. So don't do that, folks. But there are other ways you can show solidarity. And indeed, the TSSA website, they sent a great email out saying how to show solidarity. It's actually really important that you don't undermine the legitimacy of other strikes. So doing underhand stuff can be problematic. You don't want to risk, bearing in mind how much anti-union law there is at the moment, you don't want to risk delegitimizing the RMT strike and any potential future TSSA strikes by doing something illegal. So just make sure if you are going to show solidarity, do so in a way that's legal, so you don't give the government an excuse to bulldoze through the strike. So lots of good stuff on the TSSA website on that front, actually. What else? Oh yeah, so the normal right-wing frothing was happening. Here's Jonathan Miller, who it's a Spectator piece, so you expect it to be a load of rot. This didn't disappoint. Absolute nonsense. Don't go to the Spectator website to read it. Just look for the screenshots on Twitter because don't give them the clicks. Honestly, the whole point of this is a piece written for clicks more than anything else, but it is full of absolute nonsense and it repeats IEA rubbish about the fact that buses can do everything better. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, What else? Oh yeah, just as of an hour ago from this recording, the Times artist did this rubbish, saying up the workers with a picture of a train driver. It's not a train driver strike. With a bunch of other workers here saying we are the effing workers. And yeah, weirdly, this cartoon, when I put it out of context, it looks even more like it's actually a thing saying just call a general strike. So yeah, I fully agree with Peter Brooks here. Yes, there should be a general strike. Everyone should be out. There should be a general strike, and that might make government think twice about its current program things, or it'll just make it turn Britain even more rapidly into a police state. Either way. Oh, moving on from strike stuff. Data don't lie. I put an asterisk after don't because obviously it does when you misuse it. But there's some very interesting data here that Tom Saunders of the Eye has pulled together, which is very nice, which is the proportion of trains arriving on time by station in May. And it's very interesting because you've got the East Anglia here, things doing pretty well. London and the South East here doing pretty well. And then everything else, particularly some of these long rural lines, actually, which is interesting. So the Heart of Wales line, the Tarka line, Cambrian coastline, really not doing very well. And actually, basically, it's saying that essentially all other stations outside of that bubble there are just not doing very well. Actually, the valleys, there's a couple of blues in the valleys. But anyway, a bit of a mess, really. And it's quite nice. It's quite a nice visualization. I'm hoping that this will lead into another visualization that my as yet unpublicly announced role with a certain institution might be useful to point out about service provision. So this is quite interesting. I like this. This is nice. Tom, this is cool. Reach out if you want to chat about stuff. But yeah, nice one. Very nice little bit of data viz here. Love it. And oh yeah, I zoomed in on it. I forgot that I zoomed in on it. That was a waste of scribbling. And anyway, I John Madden the wrong slide. It's fine. Yeah, you can really see it there, can't you? Crikey, it's just like this is fine. Everyone here is doing all right. I'm not suggesting it's sunshine and roses, but it's you can see that pretty much everything in all other directions is not doing so well. So quite interesting that. Yeah, just in case anyone hadn't realised, yeah, Britain's broken, and there's another visualization of this showing Britain compared to like everywhere else in terms of like GDP, and it's like everywhere else is doing kind of this, and we're down here. Because our economy is broken, because we have an economy that's propped up entirely by fake house price, overinflated house prices, and the Tories just want to turn everything into Daily Mail fodder, and everything's collapsing in on itself. So yeah, good times, hooray! Yeah, no, it's not going well for Britain, and also there's lots of papers are starting to talk about the Brexit impacts, which is at least interesting. But anyway. Talking of which, abolish the Treasury again, because everyone's favourite treasurer here, Chancellor of the Exchequer. Oh, anyway, yeah. So the Treasury. What is this? Me tweeting actually? Yes, I'm putting a picture of my own tweet. I was just pointing out that the Treasury is spiting Andy Burnham by cutting a Goulburn link, hobbling Manchester Piccadilly Station, and ignoring the proper upgrades of platforms 15-16 through Manchester. So it's ignoring long distance and suburban capacity through Manchester. At the same time, so that's about £7 billion of work that they're deliberately hobbling. At the same time, through Treasury incompetence, led by Sunak, Treasury have vaporised £11 billion through basically, I suppose it's a bit like getting a fixed rate versus a variable rate mortgage, and there are certain ways that Treasury guarantees its own bonds. It's not very exciting or interesting, and the reality is it doesn't really matter actually, because just like capital expenditure, that 11 billion isn't real money, so it doesn't really matter. But in the government's own ideology, it does matter, and yet they're willing to vaporise literally 11 billion quid through sheer incompetence. So yeah, abolish the Treasury. Just an absolute waste of time department. Disintegrate them, atomise them, sack everyone, and then just employ new people entirely from fresh in other departments. And people say, oh, it would cause chaos in Britain if you did that. Hello? Look out the window. Anyway, what else? Let's have something cheery, shall we? Yes to this. That was sensationally loud. Good God. Funky though. I quite enjoyed that little bit of like sort of retro techno. That's nice. I like that. Anyway, there's LNER. Yeah, they've put like a retro version of Gareth's retro version of Swallow Livery. Not me, Gareth. Lovely graphic design Gareth from LNER. Has done this, and it's awesome, and hopefully we'll get him on RailNatter to talk about it. But what a very, very nice livery for the 225s, which, by the way, they're drumming back into frontline service because there's so many passengers on LNER that they cannot keep up, and they're desperate to run more services. And they were at one point looking at bringing HSTs back because the capacity issues were so tight. I'll also note the only top running a full timetable at this point, I believe. So, take from that what you will. And why was I running off last time? Well, it was because I was going to the Very Light Rail conference, which I've learned quite a bit at, actually. It was quite useful. So I've recorded some stuff. I'll do a hybrid live episode. So I'll do like pre-record bits, but then I'll have a live element for the Q&A afterwards. A bit like I did ages ago. If you remember, I sat in an airport and did a Q&A over Periscope about the e-highway. I'll do that a bit like that with VLR. Should be good. Yeah, so look forward to that. I'm not sure when it'll come out because next week is different, but it'll be soon. Without further ado, that's the end of the news. Let's crack on, because I want this to be nice and short, because it's currently like 9:30, and I want to go to bed. So, right, let's get on with it. Welcome to tonight's show, everyone. Let's talk about strikes. Does look good, and what's quite nice is that more trains are going to look like this, fully intercity, liveried up. Oh, anyway, it's fading away. Marvellous. Oh. And here it is. Actually, this is a picture of an RMT strike from London Underground, because this looks like the entrance to a tube line, and it looks like London. But anyway, it's a nice picture. Because, yes, we're here to talk about strikes. I'm going to make my miniaturized face appear in the top corner. Hi. Yeah. Strike time. Let's get on with it. Firstly, there's so many people throwing blame around, and I've seen progressives or sort of left of centre progressives saying that, oh no, the RMT has to shoulder some blame for this. No, they don't. Why do they? Well, again, there's this, and I get asked the question a lot. There's all this money, that money's tight. People need to tighten their belts, and I see people talking about the fact that external shock inflation and internal shock inflation and balance of trades and all this bollocks. No. Workers and people deserve to be paid appropriately. And that's one element of this. But it's not even about pay. A reminder that Network Rail was looking... Oh, yeah, I was going to put the image in from that. I forgot to. Anyway, never mind. It's fine. Network Rail were asked and told and forced by government to make redundant or remove 8,000 staff members. That's 20% of the workforce, of their workforce. And that is just... It's bonkers. It's absolutely wild decision to make, given that railways need to be expanding, given that there's so much more that railways need to be doing, and given the skills shortage that we sack a load of skilled people, because invariably a lot of the voluntary redundancies that have already shed huge numbers of staff from Network Rail are all the senior experienced people who need to be passing experience down to younger staff. So, yeah, really problematic. And whose fault is this? It's not the RMT. It's not Network Rail's fault either. Like, okay, yeah, Network Rail are piggy in the middle, but it's frankly not actually Network Rail's fault. There are some characters within Network Rail who maybe could have gone about things differently, very senior top figures who perhaps could have played whipping boy slightly less successfully, slightly less voluntarily. But actually, reality is, you look at Andrew Haynes, he looks broken. And I dare say Tim Shoveler is not feeling particularly great about what's going on at the moment. So I don't know. Don't point the blame at Network Rail. Point the blame where it deserves to be pointed, which is, of course, squarely at government, at the DFT, and more particularly, let's face it, at our old friends here at Treasury. There they are. It's Treasury. It's their fault. Why is it their fault? Well, I meant to get rid of the animation on this. Anyway, the key players. Well, it's Sunak's fault. It's Gilligan's fault. Absolutely, he's as transport advisor. But really, it's the only person's fault. The main person's fault is it's this guy. This guy doesn't really have any power anymore. This guy, when it comes he's problematic. But actually, when it comes to this stuff, he's not really got any power. Sunak has all the power. Here's some that was supposed to be like devil horns, which actually, because drawn like the devil, but actually that's probably not a very good drawing at all. So I'm just going to give him a big. Can I draw a poop emoji? Probably not very well. I'm just going to give him a. I don't know. What's just an unhappy face. There we go. Let's just do an unhappy face. And Shap's here. Well, to be honest, he doesn't have much power either because he's sort of about as useless as a dry flannel. Just not really. So basically, if you want someone to blame, here he is. This guy, Rishi Sunak. It's his fault. So enough of my pointing out who you need to be blaming here. This is going to be a very short and probably not very good history of railway strikes. And we're going to start at the very beginning, which is in 1152, before the current era. Yeah, that's right. We are going back to ancient Egypt, because the first sort of solid evidence of a strike happened in Deir al-Medina, at the Royal Necropolis, where a bunch of a huge number of artisans who are working on, this is their village actually, this is the artisans village at the head of the Valley of Kings in ancient Egypt, and this is quite late on, by the way, well, reasonably late on in the in Egypt's history, and they were sick of the Egyptian authorities' bullshit. Basically, they'd had their they walked off the job because their wages hadn't been paid. And they walked off the job, and all of a sudden the Egyptian authorities were like, we can't actually, we haven't got anyone to build this really complicated kind of well crafted, sort of actually fairly heavily engineered kind of series of temples. So the authorities raised the wages of the artisans. So that was a victory. So hooray to the victory of the first ever historically recorded strike. And to be honest, the general trend of strike action is of successes. Certainly until the 80s, it was of successes. When we won things like, strikes have given us... What have they given us? Oh, I forget, I'm on camera. Hello, everyone. They've given us the weekend. They've given us our own bloody time, because they've limited our number of working days in a week and in a day. They've given us paid sick leave. They've given us paid holiday. They've given all of the things that you have that you literally allow you to live your life have been won through union and strike action. So don't take it for granted, folks. Anyway, let's jump a huge leap forwards to 1768 in that there England that they have, because this was primarily in the ports in England rather than across the whole UK. But certainly, and this is why have I jumped to this year? Because I believe Wikipedia is to be believed anyway. That the name for the word, the name strike came from here. These top these elements of the mast here, these top bits of the masts of shipping. Are they top riders or something like that? They've got a funny name. I can't remember. I don't know anything about boats. Actually, that's not true. I know loads about boats, but I don't know much about sailing boats. Anyway, these bits, workers would just go off, and I presume they would just like saw the top of the sail off. What was called was striking, or they struck the top of the sail off to prevent the ship from being able to leave, and that was where the term strike came from. That's the theory. Is that where it actually came from? I don't know. Historians pick me up on that one, but that's the general logic. So, jumping forward to the first sort of proper industrial action, we are jumping forward to 1842, April to August 1842. Why? Because it was the first proper general strike happened. It was known as the Plug Plot riots, and it started amongst miners in Staffordshire. And it kind of spread right the way across the country. So it was affecting mills and factories and mines. And it was up in Scotland, it was down in Cornwall, it was across South Wales, right the way across the Midlands. This came about as part of a movement, a political movement at the time that was called Chartism. The Chartists were sort of pushing for they had six things, I think. Is that right? 6 or 7? 6 things that the Chartists wanted us to have to do with like. And I'm using inverted commas here, like universal, I would say male suffrage, so not really universal suffrage. But anyway, it was pretty much a working class movement for like massive political reform to bring people into the franchise, bring men into the franchise. Let's face it. But anyway, baby steps, and so there were things like equal size constituencies, not having property rights to limit whether you, not having like property. Endowment being whether you could or could not become an MP, that sort of thing, to bring people into the franchise, and they kind of this political movement reached a peak with this general strike in 1842. This is kind of the peak of the influence of the Chartist movement, and it kind of like did continue after this, but this was kind of the peak of it. And to be honest, this strike, which kind of when was it happening? Yeah, kind of through 1842, had mixed success. To be honest, there was like violent repression, including quite a lot of people being shot. Oh wait a minute, I know what's going to happen here. Watch this. I can do this on the fly. Where are we? I'm going to do this because I didn't want that to appear. I wanted this to appear. There we go. Good. Oof. It's as if it's professional. You know what? I'm not even going to... This, I could edit that out, but I'm not going to because that's the way the world works. There's a nice plaque in... I think this is Lancaster. No, it's not. Possibly it is in Lancaster. Here in Darwin Street on the 15th of August 1842, textile workers protesting against wage cuts in the famous Plug Plot were fired upon by troops of the 72nd Regiment. Up to 3 of the demonstrators are thought to have been killed. Yeah, there's just a general vibe of like heavy repression of this. So yeah, mixed success of this one because there's pretty violent repression, but it did lead to, inverted commas, I'll put a big asterisk here, universal suffrage. It did eventually lead, it sort of validated this movement, the Chartist movement. It showed that it was widely supported, and it made government eventually kind of implement, I think, almost all but one of the 5 kind of things written on that charter, kind of the Chartist movement. All but one of them. I think the only one that they didn't do was like annual general elections, which to be fair sounds like a pretty good thing because annual general election sounds like a pain in the ass. Anyway, right. So mixed success, violent repression, but it did lead to universal suffrage, arguably. So that right. Let's jump forward to 1911. People should know this date. This was the first general railway strike. So this was from the 18th to the 19th of August. It was the first national strike of railway workers in Britain. It was basically it was the culmination of kind of multiple years of disputes between the various railway companies and their staff, their workers. And also it was the first chance for the unions that by this point were starting to get really strong to show their to kind of assert their strength and sort of point out that they're like quite well organized. Kind of basically it only lasted 2 days, but this pretty substantial show of strength succeeded in forcing the Liberal government of the day to actually kind of reach settlement and actually offer them, basically pull the railway companies up on their what were called the conciliation boards that worked on payment. And essentially, there were lives lost because this led to the Llanelli riots, kind of in one look in Llanelli Station, which is pictured here, actually. Here's Llanelli Station. Now, this looks like an old picture, but actually I believe this is actually a picture from the bloody 1970s, so is that right? 60s? Anyway, it looks like actually probably a deceptively recent picture, but that's fine, no one's going to notice. It's certainly post-Second World War, this picture. Anywho, there was a blockade. Yeah, there was kind of some shenanigans in Llanelli, and a little kind of a reasonably familiar fat guy that you might know called Winston Churchill. I don't know why I called him a fat guy. It's not very fair. He was sort of a guy who you all know probably, and that lots of people have written hagiographies about. Anyway, that guy, he essentially authorised the use of lethal force. As he had in several other such situations across empire, but in this case it was against people on home turf, and it resulted in 2 or 3 workers being shot at point blank range. And no, there wasn't workers. There was like only one worker actually got shot. Some innocent guy got shot, and then a bunch of other people blew themselves up in the kind of the riot that followed that shooting, because they blew up a munitions truck, which was not a great idea in honesty. Anyway, 6 lives were lost, but a settlement was reached. So this was a pretty successful strike, the first of the national rail strikes. We jump forward to 1919, because 1919 brings us the so that's September to October 1919, brought us another massive national railway strike, and it was between what if I said between here? September to October, yeah, that's right. And again, this was so here you see some bobbies with presumably with like a kind of a BAP stored under their hat. There's some other people that I don't know. These some picketers and some police here. I don't know. In any case, it was another victory because we got standardised wages, and crucially, this brought in the 8-hour working day to the railways. So massive victory on that. Standardised wages, so we didn't have this competition between the railway companies, which, to be fair, at this point we're about to be smooshed into one thing anyway. So yeah, massive victory for 1919. Strikes are not all rosy though, and if we jump forwards to a pretty infamous year, 1926, 4th to the 12th of May, 1926 was the year of the massive general strike. 1.5 million workers went on strike. It was a massive show of sympathy to the coal miners who were striking for to get better wages and to improve working conditions. This was not a great success. In fact, I would argue this was a failure. This is, by the way, this is a bus with bus workers also went on strike, and here's a bus, and it had all of them had like one army guy with a rifle on it. So nice bus though. Anyway. This is a failure, unfortunately. 1926 was a failure, certainly from a railway perspective, but generally the strike was broken. Sympathy strikes were actually banned as a result of this, so why we can't go on strike just because we feel like supporting another union. Those were banned. And low wages and poor conditions for the miners remained actually at this point. So that was a bit of a failure despite the scale of that strike. An enormous, probably the UK's biggest strike ever. So that's 1926. Jump forwards to 1955. This is the strike that everyone's talking about at the moment, right? Everyone's talking about 1955. May to June 1955. Massive strikes, primarily ASLEF led, right the way across the railways. And, well, there's a variety of things to say about these strikes. Hello, yeah, I need to remember that I'm on camera. Hi, everyone. Firstly, these strikes are attributed as being the reason why rail freight was declined so substantially. But as we talked about in our rail freight episode, that merely just accelerated a decision that had already been made, frankly, by a lot of the haulage companies, a lot of the logistics companies and companies within supply chains, that they were choosing to move to road anyway by this point. More interestingly, oh, by the way, everyone should go and read Dr. David Turner's thread on this. He did a fantastic thread. It'll be fairly high up his profile because he's not tweeting much, but he's on pat leave. So go and find that thread, read it. It's fantastic, as you'd expect from David. Just brilliant. And David points out that actually passenger ridership rose after this. It bumped up after this. So the idea that we're going to the strikes this year, the 2022 strikes, are going to see a decline in railway usage like 1955 is just not historically sound. It really isn't. So saying, 1955 was another failure because the unions really were defeated on this one. Low wages remained in place. This was not a victory. 1955 was not a victory, despite the scale of those strikes. So, not great, to be honest. Jump forward to 1971. I don't exactly know when this one-day strike was, but hopefully you all know why there was a strike in 1971. I think it was in July, but I don't know exactly what day it was. I think it was maybe in late July, but someone else can correct me on this. Because APTE was moved. It was moved out of acceptance by a union after the vehicle had been blacklisted, and this resulted in the whole union going, right, sod you, day of strike. I need to drink some water. Where's my bottle? It's miles away. Damn it. Anyway. I could do with a drink of water. Anyway, I digress. We've been going for only going for half an hour. It's okay. This is going to be a short and sweet one. They struck 1 day of strike, and it was a success because, good grief, did British Rail not never forget to ignore or to pay attention to the needs of drivers in train design. I consider that to be a successful strike because the money, what was that? Way more than the annual budget of the APT was burned in dealing with the aftermath of this strike, the cost of lost revenue. So, right, that was 1971. We're going to jump forwards to the Winter of Discontent that everyone thinks isn't the Winter of Discontent, because everyone remembers the Winter of Discontent as being from 1974, but it isn't. The Winter of Discontent is 1978-79. And things were bad at this point. Bad things had been happening for a variety of reasons, but there was just a huge swell of discontent across both the public and the private sector, in fact. Private sector wages had risen, public sector wages had not. So we had just, public services collapsing, fire ambulance not functioning, roads not being cleared of snow. It happened to be one of the worst winters in the 20th century. It was like the third worst winter in the 20th century or something. just an enormous calamity, really, for the functioning of Britain. Kind of like we're leading up to now. We're getting to the point of things kind of collapsing in on themselves at this point. In any case, you can see a scene here from like an abandoned tip. This looks, this looks suspiciously like a picture from the US, though, actually. Yeah. I don't know, it's a nice picture anyway, but that does look... The architecture in the background does... Oh, no, there's a red phone box and a British sign here. That's a British sign here. That's British. And there's a red phone box. So we're in Britain, it's okay. I just forget how old-fashioned the late 1970s still looked. Anyway, yeah. I put OBS over there, which is why I'm looking a bit more over there. The chat's not here. Normally the lovely chat. Hello, everyone not in the chat, or in the chat right now, talking amongst yourselves. Anyway, right, so tip closed, yeah, and you can see this tip is in the middle of a park. Brilliant. Anyway, everything was going wrong. Unfortunately, there was a cascade of strikes across different workers, and the railways were no different. So railway workers got involved in that strike. The challenge was that, and this was true for all of the public sector. So private sector had seen a pay rise. Public sector workers. Basically, there were macro effects going on. The government was just not in a good way. Callaghan's government was just not in a good way. There had been a recession as a result of a variety of factors, including the oil crisis, sort of the second oil crisis, and lots of other factors at play, bigger than the railway, that basically limited government's ability to offer anything. And I'd say the failure, these strikes did not necessarily lead to Thatcher's victory, but they were certainly part of the bigger picture that led to Thatcher's victory, which very much smashed the power of unions. So I'd say that the late 70s strikes are probably the largest failure in strike history, because they resulted in just like a swinging heap of anti-union measures, which really limit the sorts of things that we can do today. People are asking the question, why can't you just let everyone travel by for free on the railways? Well, because there is an anti-union law that was introduced over this period that prevents rail workers from doing that. There are lots of sort of short of strike action activity that unions are just not allowed to do. The reason being that the hope is that unions would never do the actual strike because they haven't got the cash or the political capital to do so. Union busting is what happened as a result of this. Real heavy union busting. Not good. Right, let's jump forward to 1982. We're kind of midway through, or towards the sort of, if you like, the peak of British Rail's sort of tenure, really. Things were going pretty well generally for British Rail at this point. Certainly by the mid-80s, things were in really good shape. But by this point, there were discussions about changing the way the workforce functioned. March to July 1982, we saw a series of strikes, essentially trying to raise awareness of flexible rostering and some of the eroding of worker rights associated with it. This was working out whether this was a success or a failure is a bit tricky, really. I'm calling it a partial victory of a strike, because what is now the RMT, what was the National Union of Railwomen, their strike collapsed actually after a couple of days. So ASLEF stepped in, grew that strike, and some concessions were won, but it is a kind of a partial victory. It wasn't a total success. For a more successful strike, we jump forwards to a strike that I think bears much more resemblance to how things are currently in the UK than any other, which is 1989, April to July 1989. We jump forwards, we get to the late 1980s. So there were massive strikes right the way across. A 1 or 2 day strike. There are a series of strikes actually, but there are certainly there was like several stoppages, sort of several 24-hour stoppages, and it was actually by the NUR, what's become the RMT, and it was like underground drivers, it was mainline railway drivers, but it was also other staff as well. Where else left involved in this one? Again, the history of strike. Funnily enough, the history of strikes is remarkably poorly recorded, and certainly not very easily accessible. And also, Wikipedia strike pages are just dreadful. It's like all libertarian guys who write Wikipedia. Clearly, I know that's not true, but vibes. Anyway, there were wage talks. They fell through. At this point, inflation in the UK was a very familiar number, which was around 8 to 10%. I think it's like 8.5% kind of inflation at the point of these strikes, and And yeah, so that kind of that had partly led to pay demands, but it was other kind of staffing queries as well, as you'd expect. This strike was an absolute victory because there was a 9%. If inflation was about 8.5%, there was the pay rise awarded was about 0.5% above that. So there was an actual 9% pay rise awarded. This was a victory. And do you know how much this affected ridership? It didn't. Ridership continued to rise until the full early 90s recession, which followed this inflation bubble, by the way. The recession, which arguably was as a result of the austerity measures used to fight the inflation. Are we going to learn this? No, probably not. Anyway, the pay rise was awarded. This was a success, and ridership continued to grow. So, yeah. Oh, by the way, little interjection here. I've not included, or not generally. I know it is a railway. Underground is a railway, but there have been a lot more strikes, and so rather than covering all of the underground strikes, I'm pressing this into the fact there have been lots of underground strikes, and those underground strikes often lead to discussions about driverless trains and all the same chat over and over again. There have been successful strikes. There have been less successful strikes. But I think better historians than I can cover that. Well, I'm not a historian. Historians can talk about that and go into detail about that. And there is plenty of stuff you can read about it. But I thought, for the sake of a short episode, I'd kind of praise generally the mainline railway, and not look at in detail at the underground. And kind of obviously then, if we jump to kind of talking about 2016 to 2019. So we've been having on and off railway strikes for ages. Since 2016. About a variety of things. So driver-only operation is certainly the main thread that ties a lot of these together. The keep the guard on the train sort of fight. This one here. I looked at this guy. Keep the guard on the train. Now, I've talked about this before on this. The reality is that since I was sort of in the early years of these strikes, my politics has changed. I've got. They say that as you get older, you get more conservative. It's just not true. It's people confusing the way that generations have certain political views compared to just when you get older. The generations as you get older perhaps are more conservative. But anyway, as I've got older, I've only got more socialist. I've only got more left wing, if you like. That still doesn't necessarily mean I 100%. Basically, this is messy. The DOO stuff, the guard stuff is messy. Absolutely right. The challenge is that the unions are right that this is the DOO argument. The technological argument and the arguments that were made about safety were perhaps a bit of a red herring, but the arguments about the fact that under a privatised railway system, the only lever that the private rail operating companies had, train operating companies had to make any profit was to basically squeeze staffing. That was the only lever they had, and indeed they tried to pull it as much as they could. And so to that extent, yes, it was right that these strikes are right to push on that. I think the messaging, I might, I don't fully agree, and I think there is a discussion about not modernisation in the sense that the current strikes are. There's the word modernisation is being basically used to say modernisation is a euphemism for sacking people. I don't think that is the case here, and capacity. There are benefits to the railway of operating with staff. Changing the roles of staff on the train. But I don't believe that there shouldn't be a staff member on the train. So driver-controlled operation versus driver-only operation is sort of a bit of the battle. This is a bit more of a... So for me, this one is a really complicated picture. And actually, these strikes have covered a load of things, not just driver-only operations. So it's quite a mixed, complicated picture. And there's some strikes that I absolutely would unconditionally support. Actually, to be honest, politically where I am now, I absolutely support these strikes. What I would say is that I think messaging, being careful about messaging is really important because my politics has changed a bit. But I would say these strikes have still seen mixed success because there have been quite a few situations where there are concessions won by the unions. So this is on an operator by operator basis, rather than you can't actually do a national strike really. So it's an operator by operator basis. Some victories, some. Oh, excuse me. Some, we still have the rollout of driver-only operation, which, whatever. But driver-controlled operation, which, ostensibly, for example, on Merseyrail, that battle is still going on. I think that driver-controlled operation is the right thing on Merseyrail. I think that you keep someone on that train. There's the discussion of, yes, but if you take away the fact that there has to be someone, absolutely has to be someone on the train, which is what this discussion is, to allow flexibility in case there is a bit of a perturbation, you've ended up with staff elsewhere and you want to just run the train quickly and then you pick up the staff where they are in the right place. I agree that there is the risk that if you take that protection away, then the train operators might push to just, well, if we've done that a bit, then we'll just not ever have staff on there. But the way you do that is, I think you fight for, well, you have to have, on 19 out of 20 trains, there has to be there has to be an audit every month of the number of trains that run without, or the number of miles run without a person on the train, and approach it that way as a way to make sure that DCO is mandated, that you still have someone on the train who isn't the driver, who is on the train actually looking after people, but it allows that the kind of the effectiveness of a bit of flexibility. So yes, it's very difficult, and the key thing is that the unions are always very wary of, and rightly so, is a little crack being opened in the door to allow a flood of stripping away of rights or of jobs. So I can absolutely understand. I'm less naive now. I can absolutely understand why this has become such an important issue to fight hard on. It's one for a pub. I think it's a very complicated chat. It's one for the pub, maybe after a future live RailNatter, right? Anyway, and we bring us to now, June 2022, happening right now. The RMT is leading on these strikes at the moment, but the TSSA is currently balloting. So this could balloon. It could absolutely balloon, and it might well do. TSSA is my union, RMT is, again, remember, this is not a driver strike. It might well become that. Ask Left if you want to get involved. But actually, it's not a driver strike. This is a strike of non-driver, generally staff. It's people right the way from cleaning trains up to, maintenance staff, frontline staff, and then if it's TSSA, that'll include a huge range of. They always refer to it as managerial, but it's not just managerial. It's engineers. It's professionals. Generally white collar staff. RMT blue collar, TSSA white collar, in a really really kind of not very kind of a rough way to kind of. Oh, there's a word I'm looking for, but I'm so tired I can't think of it. Sorry, it's been a long day. But you know what I mean. Like, that's the broad breakdown of the way that these two unions function. We might see it expand. But my message is essentially, like, we should be doing our best as people who are RailNatterers, hello everyone, to be helping to make sure that message is getting out. This is firstly, this is not about drivers. Even if it was, it wouldn't be a big deal. But it's not about drivers. It's about other frontline staff that keep the railway running. Signallers as well, of course. Another thing is the fact this is government's fault. Ignore Network Rail. Network Rail are just piggy in the middle. This is a government. These are the Tory rail strikes. I like that hashtag. They are Tory rail strikes. It's a good way to kind of capture it. And it's only government that can stop this happening. But unfortunately, government is wedded to a strip and sell ideology at this point. So where are things going to go? I really don't know. I really do not know. How depressing. Oh, anyway. It only means this has been a short one because I had to put it together at last minute, and I don't think you need a long one. And the strike's happening, so we've already, hopefully, possibly, maybe, probably had a day of strikes. There are another 2 days of strikes to go. Full solidarity to the RMT. For anyone curious, in fact, I'll talk about that in a minute. Firstly, audio only. I think I'm a bit behind. Sorry, I'm a bit behind. You don't know that I'm a bit behind because you aren't able to listen because I've not uploaded these, but it's been a bit hectic. But things should be a bit smoother next week. There'll be a few things will all land at once. Anyway, yes, so apologies for that. Patreon, continue to support me doing this stuff. Masket for the merch, paypal.me for pennies, and Discord for more of the chat that's going on and to sort of see what I'm up to. If you're Patreon only, you get the Discord chat of seeing what I'm up to at Rail Live as well. Talking of which, next week's episode will be, because Rail Live is happening right now, I will edit that episode together. Good grief, this weekend I'm going to have so much to do. Oh, crikey. Actually, that's a very good point. I'll talk and then I'll drop this slide in on top. So, yes, next week, Rail Live 2022. We're going to be going around Rail Live. It's not going to be a repeat of last year's episode. This time I'm going to be a bit more focused. There'll be a bit less of my bald chest in camera and a bit more focused sort of chats and interviews and discuss and going and picking on features. It'll be a short one as well because I'm not going to do the walk around like I did last time because it's very time consuming. But I'll just pick out a few things that I think are interesting and worth exploring. The freight presence, for example. For anyone wondering what I'm doing given that their strikes are happening, well, firstly, I'm driving down, which I always do anyway because I have too much kit to take the train with and I have to arrive very early and blah, blah, blah. That's number one. Number two, I won't be doing any interviewing of people on the Thursday, which is strike day. So Wednesday is not a strike day. Today has not been a strike day. So today I've been doing all my filming. Tomorrow I will be doing probably a bit of filming, but actually I won't be doing any. I won't be speaking to anyone. I won't be doing any interviews with people. So yeah, and I don't intend to hide away from the discussion of the strikes while I'm there speaking to people. So yeah, I'm sure I'll hopefully get a chance to speak to Nigel. I know he and I don't think we entirely disagree on lots of the stuff behind it, but we disagree on the strike. We disagree on the impact of the strike and why the strike is happening and the necessity of the strike. And I don't think we'll shy away from that. We'll have that discussion. We'll see if Nigel wants to kind of dart away from it or chat specifically about it. But yeah, we won't be shying away from it, and hopefully we'll speak to might speak to a couple of industry leaders about it as well. But that day is a normal working day, ostensibly. So hopefully there'll be lots of people attending Rail Live on Wednesday. Catch up, and do come find me on either day and come and say hello if you're around. If you're at Rail Live, come and say hi. Yes, the other thing is, yes, this weekend finally we see the return of an Engineer Plays. I'm very excited about that. Yeah, it's going to be return of an Engineer Plays. We shall be returning to Amphitrust, to return to the Archipelago. Many things will be happening. Lots of fun stuff to show you and share as history develops, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The return, and then there'll probably be about 2 weekly. So there'll be a new episode every 2 weeks, I think, to keep it. So yeah, it might not be. There'll be long episodes probably. So there's plenty of content there for you to absorb. But I don't think they're going to be every week because there's a bit of prep to do for each one. You know, there's a bit of lore to thread through. Anyway, yeah. Really, it only remains for me to go large face, to get my large face here. Hello, I've got a big face. And to say, firstly, this watch is gorgeous. This watch, yes, the Mondaine Swiss watch that I got as a present from Dina. Thanks, Dina. Look at that, it's nice. It's upside down, I know, but anyway, it's nice. It's nice to have treats and birthday presents for a year and a half ago. No, it's gorgeous. Thanks, Dina. Everyone, it's been a pleasure. It's been a short one, but it's been nice to have you along in the chat. Hello, everyone in the chat. Sorry it's not a live one, but I'm literally I'm somewhere in a field. What time is it? 9 p.m. Anyway, I'm out and about. I will see you all. I'll see you all next week for another pre-record because it's the Rail Live one. But I'll see you this weekend coming for an Engineer Plays. Cheerio, cheerio, everyone. Cheerio.